Welcome to CardsChat, the friendliest poker podcast in town from the world's #1 poker community. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Robbie Straczynski. Thank you so much for joining us on episode number 123 of CardsChat, the friendliest poker podcast in town. Today's guest holds a special place in poker lore, having racked up the most cashes in the history of live ranking tournament poker. As of this interview being recorded, that stands at over 625 cashes, according to the Hendon Mob. And of course, we're talking about Miami John Cernuto. On today's show, we will take a tour through his illustrious poker career, and we'll also get to learn about him and his life away from the felt. John, welcome to the CardsChat Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I just have one thing to ask you. Why am I number 123? Why wasn't I sooner?
that's an excellent, because we just got to the J's. Well, we got to John. There you go. An excellent question.
You made me think of a funny story about the Jays, because
Sure.
One time I'm playing a WTP LA Classic event, 10,000 buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And on day 2, I'm going to my table and there's a seat open, but my table's down a little further. And John Jawanda's sitting at the table and he said, "You're probably over here." I said, "No, I'm down the way." And he said, "No, you're probably here because they have us listed in alphabetical order as my first name." So there's Johnny Chan, Johnny World, John Jawanda, John Esposito. I said, "Well, sorry to disappoint you guys, but I'm not here."
Right.
They put me in the M's.
Oh,
Michael with Miami John. So I got to play with like the Mikes, which were much better than the Johns.
That's
And they objected so vehemently that after the first 2 hours we played, they redrew everybody. It was pretty funny.
hilarious.
They were all pissed off.
That's
I kind of like the Mikes.
How long ago was this?
Well, before Matt Savage took over at the LA.
Got it.
This was-
Okay.
The tournament director, her name was Sherry, and that's what she did that day. And it's just everybody went crazy. It was funny.
Wow. Goodness.
Not too many remember that story, but yeah, I'm glad I got moved.
That's good. And Matt is, one of our very avid listeners. He listens to all the shows. So Matt, I hope you enjoyed that one. So, you have over 625 results, and, we could do this entire show just based on me asking questions that revolve around those results. We're not going to do that. Don't worry. But, obviously some questions will come from there. I wanted to start with something a little different, though. It's sort of said, it's kind of known that even elite poker players cash in only about 20% of, maybe 15 to 20% of the tournaments they play. Is that something that sort of has held true for you over the years?
Yeah, I guess if you average it out, I'd say that's about correct. I had years where I was, if I played 7 tournaments, I cashed 3 times. It was like 3 out of 7. Amazing. And then I had years where, not so productive, where, maybe 1 out of 6 was a cash,
Right.
And then if you go where you don't finish top 3, you're struggling then, you start coming in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. I mean, it's good that you cash, but, you're not getting to the top. So
Right.
every year was different. And I also play a lot of cash games during the 1990s and the early 2000s. So that kind of was my bread and butter back in those days.
But just to sort of extrapolate the math, so if you've cashed 625 times, it's not unthinkable to say you've played in the neighborhood of 3,000 live tournaments, possibly even more.
It seems reasonable.
Wow, that's a lot of tournament poker.
I don't have them. I don't have like a lot of the players who are like the top money lists.
Right.
They have the money column win. They don't have the loss column.
Right.
So I'm ahead of the game. I'd like to think so anyway.
That's
I'm still
true.
here. I still have a bankroll, so we're good.
There you go. It's always good to still have chips and be in the game.
Oh yeah.
By at least one measure, obviously, you've had more success than anyone else in history in tournament poker. Can you describe, from your unique perspective, what does it feel like when you bust out before making the money, as opposed to busting out after making it into the money? Or is it the same thing?
All depends. It all depends on, like just the other day, on level 7 at a local tournament. I had 250,000 in chips, which was average was 38. I said, there's no way that I'm not going to, win this thing. I was convinced. I barely made the money. I mean, it's like I came in 15th and they paid 15 spots. So you never know how it's going to go. Now, usually if it's a really bad beat and you're really close, I think that's when you feel it the most. In the beginning, the tournament, it's not so bad, but once, the last table or two, and especially if it's for a big amount or it's the bubble time, it feels like getting slapped across the face with a 2x4. It's really hurts,
Right.
And then once you're in the money, you're still a little disappointed, or maybe a lot disappointed. And to be honest with you, I've been disappointed coming in second. And the main reason is a lot of times you make a deal. A few times I've won it and I had no deal. And to me, that's like floating on a cloud. That's like the best feeling in the world. No deal, won all the money. It's great. It's great. But anything short of that is can be disappointing. But my ex-wife had told me that the way to handle those situations is to not let the high get too high and the lows get too low. And I was a very emotional player in the beginning, and I certainly, I won $100,000 in this tournament. I'm unbeatable. I'm the greatest. And then all of a sudden you get a taste of reality and you don't win anything. And then you're down. I suck, man. I'll never be good. So you got to find a happy medium.
Sure.
To be successful. You can't let it let the highs get too high and you feel invincible and you make mistakes, or the lows too get low and you feel depressed and you make too many mistakes.
That's such an important lesson for anyone listening to this, whether you're a pro or an amateur or someone taking the game more seriously. And obviously, you've learned that lesson long ago. At what point do you think that lesson kind of like, the penny dropped for you? Was it, I guess you were already a pro, but at what point did that sort of happen where, you became that more mild-mannered, less emotional player?
It resonated with me. Probably, I hate to admit this, but with the explosion of television, it kind of brought me to my senses, because now you kind of got to be on your best behavior, and you can't get too emotional. So I really toned a lot of it down. So that was helpful, but I was already metamorphosing into a better, more controlled player. And started reading articles, talking to other players. I remember talking to Mike Mattisell once, and he said, John, I never make eye contact with you. I don't even know who's in the box. I said, how is that possible? How can you do that? I'm very emotional. I'm very Italian. And so, talking to Mike about that, little things like that, they add up after a while. Now, where I was maybe behaving well 30% of the time, I'm behaving well 95% of the time.
Excellent.
So it's all good. There's a learning curve.
Of course.
I wasn't a natural at it.
Of course.
Like if I could give you a couple of examples of two of the men I respect the most would be Ted Forrest and Eric Seidel. Those two guys were princes, and nothing ever bothered those two guys. And that's who I tried to be more like. And I kind of like, they were kind of like my role models in that area, especially.
Very cool. You obviously play all the games, not just Hold'em. Do you approach mixed game tournaments differently than Hold'em tournaments in some way?
I actually approach them the same, because to me, it's not about mixed game versus Hold'em, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the difference is limit poker versus no limit poker. That's when I approach it a little bit differently. So the night before no limit, if it's a substantial buy-in, I'll go over my notes. I'll try to read, see a blog, anything that will get me focused towards the game. And but going over my notes and talking it over with friends, did I do something wrong here? A little bit of a learning curve. I review all that stuff, the night before. On the daily tournaments that I play almost, 5, 6, 7 times a week, not so much. But to me, there's some factors between the two conditions, and one is game knowledge. You have to have a good knowledge of the game to be able to play it right. So whether it's limit hold'em, no limit hold'em, you have to have this, this kind of knowledge. And game selection. Now we don't have in a tournament to be able to select our tables. It's already our customers are already there. So no limit requires a quicker adaptation of who you're playing against, what they're like. Are they loose? Are they tight aggressive? Are they, you have to go through that, and that takes a little bit of time. So in no limit, in limit tournaments, like course and things like that, to me that's like second nature. I don't even think about it. So I can respond more appropriately. So I do tend to treat no limit differently than the limit games. That's how I would categorize it anyway. Right. And then also money management is extremely important too.
Sure.
You shouldn't be playing above your means, because then you're going to play scared and they're going to sense it and they're going to pick on you. And, so stay within your means is my best suggestion to anybody.
Wise words. Absolutely. Well, how do I ask this one? Let's think. Okay,
you can't think of a question, then maybe I can't think of the answer.
No, because I had an interesting follow-up on that one with the.
Okay, good.
At least I thought it was an interesting follow-up. 1 second.
I'm sure it is. I'm 79. Yes. Okay, you need to help me in this interview, not the other way around.
I got it. So you had said that you do prepare before a tournament. Poker has evolved obviously over many years. So has the study of poker. At what point, or was it right from the beginning that you felt, okay, I need to study, I need to prepare, as opposed to just sort of, I know how to play, I know my game, I'll go by feel? Like, at what point did you sort of flip that switch and realize, okay, I need to keep working on my game continuously?
Yeah, that's a very easy question to answer. When you go broke.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I started as a fired air traffic controller. So I was basically a government employee.
Right.
And the only game experience that I had was home games.
Yeah.
So I came to Vegas figuring, I'm pretty damn good at home, So I got this mentality that, this is going to be a piece of cake. I'm just going to be a professional poker player. Yep. That was my dream. Even during the strike, at the time, I didn't care about the job. I do now, but back then I said, screw it. If I lose my job, I'm going to Vegas. That's the way I felt about it. So I go out there, and there are people that have read Super System and David Skalansky and things like that, and I'm just thrown in with the sharks, So I think I'm pretty cool player, and I know what's going on, but yet I don't know jack. To me, 9 deuce suited is a reasonable hand to play. Sure. I played it. It was limit hold'em was the main game back then. We didn't have card player back then the way we do now. There was a card player. There was June Fields was the owner of the magazine, but it wasn't filled with a whole bunch of knowledge and strategy like Barry Schumann and Linda Johnson brought that into card player. So I didn't have any really materials, to read. But so I had friends that would say, well, John, you could play a pair of 9s by 3-betting, and it never really occurred to me, So, I would try it, even I tried it with deuces,
Right.
And sometimes they worked and sometimes it didn't. So I think they were my friends, poker players, they could be setting you up too. So, but anyway, that's what I call the school of hard knocks. So I was knocked around for 2.5 years. And believe it or not, even as an amateur, the exact pay I made playing poker was the same as air traffic controller.
Wow.
Okay. I know, I couldn't believe it. Well, back then we didn't get paid that much.
Because air traffic controllers are very highly paid.
Yeah, they're making 150,000 a year. Back then, my high was about 35,000.
Okay, well, that wasn't horrible for back then, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
At what point did you consider yourself to be a true professional poker player? I mean, obviously, it's what you did for a living, but at what point did you say, okay, I'm good at this. This is how I'm going to continue and make my living for the rest of my life?
Sure. So getting back to the first question, when I got busted after 2 good years, and then within 6 months, running bad, playing bad, whatever. I hardly made any money. My bankroll didn't hold up, and I was out of funds. So at that time, I went back and I said, I'm done with this. So I said goodbye to my new friends, and I drove all the way back to Daytona Beach, and I got a job. Like, that's all I know how to do. I got a job, right? And my only skills was air traffic, and I was blackballed from being rehired by President Reagan,
right,
and his crew. So I got a job as a dispatcher. At least I could talk on the microphone, So, like being a 911 operator and things like that. And I did that for about 9 or 10 months. And then a good friend of mine, his name is, he's not with us any longer, Bobby Romanis, called me and says, hey, Las Vegas Hilton is opening up dealer jobs. And Tom Bowling is having the room. At the time, Tom Bowling was a big name. He says, why don't you come out and, come back? So I drove all the way back to Las Vegas, took the job dealing at the Las Vegas Hilton. At that particular time, I realized there's more to the game than what I thought, the home game mentality. I was a kind of a player who learned from his mistakes, but if you didn't learn from your mistakes, you're in a lot of trouble in poker. Everybody knows that,
Right.
So I learned, like, through the school of hard knocks. At that time, playing poker again as a dealer, and when you get off, you play a couple hours and stuff like that. I realized if I'm going to make money at this game, why would I give all my tips away to all these other players? I got to take the game more serious. So I just did. So there was a little more material back in those days. I read the Super System, which was very helpful. Thank you, Doyle and Chip. After about 3 months of dealing, I said, I want to be a proposition player. A proposition player is the house pays you, and it's not a good job, by the way. It's like, it was decent. I forget how much per hour it was, maybe 25, 30 bucks an hour. So it's better than dealer pay.
Right.
But you had to play your own money. They didn't, I wasn't a shill.
Sure.
So I'd get in to the worst games.
Right.
When the game got good, I have to get out.
Right.
For the customer. So didn't like that part too much. But I was forced to play Raz, which I knew a little bit about from my days at Stardust. So I played Raz. And then they wanted me to prop 1530, 7 card stud 8 or better, which is my first bracelet, right? And I said, I tried. I says, I don't like this game, man. I don't even understand it. I'm just my money. So I quit because of that.
Wow.
So fast forward maybe a month or two later after I quit. Well, actually, I didn't quit then. I kept on. But there was a tournament called the Amarillo Super Bowl of Poker, Amarillo Slim, at Caesar's Palace. I went wire to wire in a stud event. $48,000 was a monster win back in those days. And that's when I really started to take the game more serious and more professional. I played well. I got lucky when I had to. I think I lost one pot the whole day. It was just one of those days.
Wow.
Just, the sun and the moon were on my side. What can I tell you? And I'd say that's when I realized I was never a professional at all during the first 3 years. I really wasn't. The School of Hard Knocks, the learning experience, we didn't have internet back then. So you have guys playing thousands and thousands, millions of hands. They can get in 1 year, 5 years of my type of experience.
Sure.
They get it like that, and they become much better than I could ever be.
Wow.
So that's when I started reading more, learning more. It just was a learning curve that I just always improved to this day. I still have room for improvement. So that's anybody thinks they know it all, they're crazy.
And that's someone with decades of experience talking. So I want to ask you about that, specifically about the learning aspect. Obviously, ideally, you want to be playing at a table where you're the best player. On the other hand, it's also nice to a degree to play against players who really do challenge you. Do you have a preference?
Preference of what?
Well, again, because if you're playing against players who you're better than, obviously you're going to make some money. If you're playing against players who challenge you, it gives you the opportunity to learn, to put you in interesting spots, to improve your game. So do you have a preference between one or the other, those sorts
when it comes to making money, I choose option A. When
Okay.
it comes to learning the game and being a better player, I take B.
That's fair.
I mean, that's fair.
That is
And
a
I do
fair
learn
thing.
from good players. A few of them are willing enough to share, and I try to, and I do that with players that are coming into the games, especially mixed games, and I help them out. Sometimes some people say I help too much, but that's just the kind of person I am. I don't mind doing that. But to answer your question, definitely, you're going to learn from playing with the tough guys because they always put you in harm's way. So I feel they'll take me out of my comfort zone. In limit games, I'm the one putting people in harm's way. I feel more confident like that. So that's how I would choose that.
Okay, that's fair. I couldn't help but look all the way back to result number 1 that you had, your ranking cash back in 1987. You came in 21st in a $500 no limit hold'em event in Las Vegas, and I noticed another player who cashed there was Poker Hall of Famer Maury Escandani. Do you remember the first time you cashed in a poker tournament? And was that the first time, or just
You bring this up because I was just did an interview for a Spanish magazine. Asked me the exact same question.
Oh, no kidding.
I'll give you the exact same answer.
Okay.
Hell no, I don't remember anything about that because it wasn't my first. Hello.
Okay.
I played tournaments back in 1983, 84, 85, 86. None of those are recorded anywhere. So I played at the Las Vegas Hilton. I played at the Stratosphere, which was called Vegas World back then. I played at the Golden Nugget. I mean, some of them are recorded, but I played a lot of tournaments. I played at the Stardust. I played in a promotion one time that lasted for 9 months. 9 months.
Wow.
We played 2 tournaments a day, 6 days a week. Can you imagine that?
No, I can't. That's unbelievable.
That's not on the records. There's
right.
No way. So I remember my first tournament was 1983. I won $3,000 in a limit hold'em event, and they put it in a newspaper. And I don't remember the newspaper, probably called Poker News, but not today's Poker News.
Right.
And it was a periodical, so it looked like a newspaper, And it was my picture, and I just felt like, this is really nice. I feel like I'm part of a community now. I really enjoyed it. And that was my first dose of, I don't want to call it fame, but I was recognized,
Notoriety. Yeah.
It meant a lot to me. That one I remember. Maury, no clue. Although I knew Maury always tried to run over me in stud. He'd have pocket deuces and he'd always 3-bet me, and then he'd always catch a deuce, and I'd always yell at him, That's back in my high school days. I said, I got aces, Maury, and yet you 3-bet me with this piece of crap, But Maury's a wonderful guy, he's lovable,
Sure. Well, looking back at an illustrious career, again, besides the cashes, just looking all together, you've cashed, at least in the recorded results, for over $6 million. So those are the ones that are reported. Your biggest win, you took down the WSOP bracelet event. You've got plenty of hardware accolades. When you look back, what is more sort of the highlights for you? Is it, the recognition, the fame, the trophies, or, some big wins, or even maybe you made a deep run and hit 4th place, but you were only expecting to barely cash or something. What stands out to you the most?
Prior to the Hendon Mob, keeping track of us and card player and all that kind of stuff, didn't really pay attention, didn't really care. I kept my own poker books, my own records, and that's where I got my pride from. I'm doing good, I'm doing bad. That's where, I could feed myself off of that. When Hendon Mob came along, all of a sudden, your name's out there, you're being recognized. I got an award.
Right.
Can you believe that?
The icon
for
award
the most cashes.
Yeah.
So that was kind of exciting. And I got the same, I was awarded the same day Johnny Chan got an all-purpose award. And it was an honor sitting at the table with Johnny. And then I noticed, what was his name? Another older player, and I can't remember. Frank Casella. Frank. And so everybody at my table, and I had a doctor friend of mine and this lovely wife, Dawn, that were there. And we're all, like they're in their 50s and 60s. And I don't know, but Johnny's in his 60s or something like that. And I'm, like 74, 75. And then I made a little speech, and I said, let's see, I got one problem with the Hendon Mob. You put all the old guys on one table, isn't that a little bit like age discrimination? So that got a little bit of a laugh, and that was a highlight. But now you get so much recognition for it when people come up to you and they congratulate you, and it's very respectfully done. It makes you feel good about yourself. That's all I can say. I don't have a issue with like, oh, I'm the best, or I'm the best at the game, or I'm not that kind of a person. But it's nice to be recognized, without you tooting your own, waving your own flag or tooting your own horn.
Sure.
It's pretty cool.
Well, over the course of a tournament, you often have to change gears. So we'll switch gears a little bit with this question. If you're just listening, folks, you don't see that over John's right shoulder, he's got a couple bottles of wine, which makes me want to ask, what do you do to decompress? How do you have fun when you're not playing, John?
Go to a local bar and have a Jack and Diet and play a little bit of video poker or some Keno. Like all the other degenerates. I'm not really a degenerate, but I've had friends, male, female, and we'll go out and have a drink once in a while, and we have fun. That does make things lighter. Doesn't put you in the best frame of mind the next day if you have too much, but
right.
Now the wine, this is a little benefit from playing at the Orleans. I've met a lot of nice people down there. I play there quite often, and there's a wine distributor there. His name is Steve. And I won't give his last name. He might get mad at me. I don't know.
Sure.
But he always gives me a box of wine whenever I need it.
Oh, that's
and
so
he
nice.
charge me a thing. So thank you, Steve. So there's a lot of other benefits to poker. You meet a lot of nice people, and a lot of and Steve's a wonderful guy. And I'm glad I got to meet him. He's just one of a list of 100 that I could say that I met, and I'm just so fortunate and grateful that I met all these people.
That's
really
beautiful.
Good people in poker.
That's beautiful. I love hearing it.
Few shady ones along the way, but we'll talk about
them. I'm sure. Well, obviously another legend. We folks, we are recording. You're going to hear this about a month after we record, but we happen to be recording the day after Doyle Brunson passed away. So I did have a Doyle question for you. He said, John, back many times back in the day, the WSOP was the best time of the year with the juiciest cash games. And obviously, there's plenty of side action during the big tournaments, during the summer these days as well. But he said that, back in the day, because the cash games were so good, he didn't play in as many tournaments. How do you approach cash games in general? Because obviously you're known for your tournament prowess. So what is your approach to cash games? And does that matter whether it's WSOP time or a different time of the year?
All right. Let me speak about that time. I came in on the very kind of like the tail end of it when I first started.
Mm-hmm.
So Doyle obviously was a very recognizable person. And the game selection that they had at the Horseshoe and the Dunes, where Doyle played with Chip and Johnny Moss and all those great older players, was just a different era. Mm-hmm. And they had bankroll back then. When I came to town, I had my retirement pay. That's all I had. I didn't have that kind of money. That's number one. Number two, can you imagine the likes of Chip and Doyle with the game knowledge and the game selection and the smart money that they had against the type of players that came into town to play recreationally with big money? You had drug dealers, you had bookies galore, and they were just like good old boys, and they would just throw their money around, kind of like got a hunch, bet a bunch type people, So Doyle and Chip and them just ate those guys alive,
Right.
I mean, I wasn't there to observe it all, but I think had I been there at that time with bankroll like that, I probably would have gone down the same path as Doyle. However, I didn't. So what I did was get really interested in tournaments. To me, Mike Sika used to have a saying about tournaments: a toothpick to make a lumberyard. So in other words, a small investment to get a lumberyard, to get a big bankroll. So that's the avenue I took. As my bankroll grew, I also played tournaments. I played in the top games for 2 decades. Not as high as the Chip Doyle. They were like 2 levels above me in terms of the blinds, let's put it that
The
way.
cash games, right?
My average game was 2 400, 3 600 with a kill, things like that. That's what I did for like almost 20 years and did fairly well at it. But the competition, the passion of a tournament was no match for side game. So I took that path. So when I did get to have a decent bankroll that I could actually do both, I did both, and I did both fairly well.
Nice, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're obviously pretty well known. We've talked about your extensive resume, and I imagine that because of that, and you said, it's nice to get recognized and people come up to you polite when they're playing with you in a tournament. Kind of by definition, that kind of puts a target on your back. When you notice that happening, does that make it easier for you to play or more difficult and more distracting for you to play?
Well, number one, I'm not Phil Hellmuth. So there's a guy with a target on his back, self-imposed, but yes, definitely a target on his back. Me, not so much. I just get people that they do want to play with me. They do want to have a story to tell, but it's not that bad with me. I don't get it that bad. Not like Phil or any of the other really, really top names. I'll tell you another person who's not, he's a professional poker player, and that's James Woods, the actor. He says, and he's worse than Hellmuth. He says, I can't play a hand without anybody wanting to have a James Woods story. Oh, I shove 7-2s up James Woods. James Woods, you know what? It says it's constant, John, and James and I became very, very close friends over the years. And, we've helped each other in life and poker, and he's a really great guy, and glad I got to know him.
That's wonderful. Poker. Well, that's good.
But I don't get a lot of that. I get it sometimes, but it's not enough to make a difference.
Okay, that's fair. Well, one thing, it's known again through a poker tournament, and Doyle said also at some point, I'm not playing the main event anymore. It's just so many days straight and so many hours. Stamina is so critical when playing in a tournament, whether it's multi-days or single days or something like that.
I agree.
That's
why I quit playing the main event myself. It's been 8 years now.
Okay. So
I know that at 8:30 on day one at night, so we've been playing for 8 hours, I gave my chips away. I was too tired to go on. And, I do have a lot of stamina. I play day after day after day, tournament after tournament, no problem. But I can't go 10 days after I've already had 40 days of WSOP around the town of Las Vegas poker. Day after day, tournament after tournament, cash games in between. That's a lot of stamina. I'm lucky to have that kind of energy, but I can't do a main event, spotting everybody 40 days of, exhausting type play.
And that's fair. And but like you say, though, and again, it's astonishing and just so impressive and inspiring. So you're lucky to have that energy, but folks like me in our 40s, folks in their 30s, 20s, even 60s are like, hey, you look at you and you're like, wow, how does he do it day in and day out and playing? I mean, just recently I saw you win a tournament. It was whatever, 3 o'clock in the morning or something after having started at 2. I mean, that, are there things that you do, sort of like mindfulness or watching your health? Are there things that you do? Any tips you could advise for people, who will someday get to your age to hopefully have the type of stamina you do?
Yeah, well, health is number one. You can't, I just came from the gym. All right. Saturday night I work out there. Bumped into an old guy, and the guy said, I make old age look good on his shirt. I said, hey, buddy, how old are you? And he goes, 91. And he said, I got a 6-pack. Well, I don't got a 6-pack. But I was impressed. That's the kind of mentality that you need. You need to exercise. You need to keep your mind healthy. Shouldn't drink as much as I do, but I'm not a drunk or anything like that. But I socialize a lot. I have fun.
Sure.
So that kind of advice is always good. Exercise is key. The best medicine in the world isn't what the doctor prescribes you. It's diet and exercise. So that's what keeps me going at 79. I hope I make it to 89 like Doyle did, and then have the mind that man had. Speaking of Doyle, I wanted to tell you one story. What I admired most about Doyle was his spirit, his willing to gamble, to mix it up. I'm in a game, not a good game. I'm playing Tommy Fisher and Billy Baxter 3-way, 3 and 600. We're at Bellagio, I think. So Doyle's sitting there talking golf stories to Tommy Fisher. And he's sitting behind him. So I think, Billy had the button.
Mm-hmm.
He raised.
What
I
game are you
re-raised.
playing?
I'm sorry, Badugi.
Hadouken.
Badugi
Okay.
is 4 different suits.
Mm-hmm.
The lowest hand wins. So
Triple
the
draw,
nuts
right.
is ace, deuce, 3, 4, rainbow, and you got 3 shots to make it.
Yep.
That's what we tell all the suckers. Oh, it's an easy game. All you got to do is make 1, 2, 3, 4. But we don't tell them about the decisions they got to make along the way.
Sure.
So anyway, I 3-bet, and Tommy Fisher folds, and Doyle says, "Excuse me, you guys care if I play that hand?" He's playing Tommy Fisher's throwaway cards. Tommy Fisher was a really good player, and he was smart money, So, and quite the golfer. So Billy Baxter's sitting there with almost the nuts. He's got ace, deuce, 3, and he says, "No, Doyle, I don't care. Come on in."
Uh-huh.
Doyle plays his own money, makes the call, and then we do a little more raising on the first draw. And by the second draw, Billy still got 1, 2, 3, and I got like ace, deuce, 4, 6, Badugi. So I got basically nuts.
That's a lot.
So finally, we get rid of Doyle.
Gosh.
Doyle's still drawn too, but you got to admire, the guy that is spirit there. So he's not a nit.
Not afraid to give some action.
No, not afraid to mix it up.
I love it.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Obviously you've been around for, well before the moneymaker area, and you witnessed that moment that live poker kind of changed forever because of so many online qualifiers and so many thousands of, those online kids who came into the game all of a sudden. What's your relationship with online poker over the last 20 years?
Well, before Black Friday, it was great. The games were good. I got on. I never really did that well. I mean, I did cash a little bit, like on the Poker Stars Sunday Millions. I played those things, but never.
Mm-hmm.
I got pretty far one time, and then I had a computer glitch, and I lost all my chips by the computer putting me all in when I didn't do anything. It was doing it all by itself.
Oh boy!
So maybe one of those kids figured a way to get me all in. And the guy that was slow playing, I didn't even know he was in the hand. He had 2 aces, and I had ace king, and I was busted. Anyway, back in those days, the kids were all into GTO, I believe it's called.
Game Theory Optimal, sure.
And they're really smart, very mathematically skilled. I wasn't. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't. So it's been a learning curve for me, and I'm still not as sharp as a lot of them are about things like that. But I hold my own. I get in those kind of games, and I do fairly well in them. I might not be the brightest tool in the shed, or the sharpest tool in the shed.
Sure.
But I hold my own.
Good.
So getting back to your question, I got off track a little bit.
No problem. About online, because I know that even when the pandemic began, there was sort of like this fun, friendly home game on PokerStars.net that I even got to compete against you a little bit. Do you? I mean, you're in Nevada. Do you play on WSOP.com and mix it up a little bit, or
Yes, I do. Not too often. Not crazy about online poker because of all the scandals that have come up, and I feel like there's an issue with that. And it doesn't even have to be cheating. I mean, people just they share information. I mean, that's a form of it, and that puts you at a big disadvantage. And I don't do that, and so just like it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Sure,
so I'm not crazy about it, but do I do it? Sure.
Okay.
But I do it a lot? No.
Right. So going by the numbers again, I told you I have to go through, there's just so much statistical data there. You have won, at least, according to my count, about 80 tournaments, just outright wins. So among your cashes, again, the ones that were recorded, we're talking like 13% of them just among the cashes are wins. So like that's pretty darn amazing also. So I'm wondering if once you make it into the money, do you do something? Do you switch gears, or do you always play to win or to ladder up? Are there any perhaps tips that you can give us folks who are just sometimes barely squeaking in? You make it into the winner's circle very often.
No special tips, but I say all of the above, of course, that you just mentioned. My biggest thing that at least lately that I pay a lot of attention to is adjusting to the structure. You got bad structures, not so good structures, and really good structures, you know.
Mhm.
So if I have the time and the patience, I'll approach it a little differently. If I don't have the time, I'll conserve whatever chips if I'm a short stack or even a medium stack or even a big stack.
Mhm.
I don't push it too much because I want to advance up the ladder. I'm not saying I don't play,
Uh-huh.
but I'm saying that, you know, I want to save the chip power that I have
Right.
because the structure is terrible and I want to get it in on that particular hand. Now, whether it be limit or no limit, at that stage of a tournament, there's not much difference because the blinds are so high. You know, you used to have 30 big blinds, then you didn't do very much for like an hour.
Right.
And now you only have 12. Now it changes rapidly. So I'll really be more patient and wait for opportunities where I can send in my soldiers
Right.
to do the work. So to send in my soldiers, I need a good hand. Okay.
Right.
It's not like no limit. No limit. You might not have to show down a hand until you get ineffective with your stack size.
Right.
Then you're going to have to show down a hand because they're going to call you. You know,
Right.
limits not quite that way. But when you get near the end of the tournament, you have to be really patient and then attack when you really got the goods.
I love the tips, and I love the analogy to the soldiers. And obviously, you're a fantastic general. You don't just send your soldiers into battle for no good reason. You got to think about your decisions and strategize. That's really excellent. I love that very much.
That's right. I did a book with Dr. Shoemaker, and it was for tournaments for making deals. And I classified those really tough players as generals. So those are the guys that like TJ Kude never make a deal. You know, they just don't do it. You know, I mean, he has, but not too often. You know, and I remember telling you I beat TJ heads up instead of then at Foxwoods with no deal, and that's when I was floating out there. You know, wow, $50,000 all mine. You know, no deal.
Is there a particular circumstance when you're at a final table and, you know, things are getting whittled down where you would want, I mean, even let's say all things being equal as far as chip stacks and stuff, and you see some tough competitors, will you be the one to initiate, hey, let's sort of make a deal, or does it matter how much money's at stake? You know, what are the factors?
If you read the book, I always say, don't ever let them see you sweat. That's the number one rule. So if you're the one offering the deal, you're probably gonna, you know, depends who's there at the table. There are people that just won't deal. So you would never, ever tell them, hey, you want to make a deal? Because they're going to take that as weakness. So no, I don't do it under those circumstances. Now, if it's a more of a social type thing where I'm playing with players that I play with all the time on the local scene, I'll do it. I'll say, hey, you guys want to, you know, I usually do ICM when I'm the lower stack, and I try to do the chip model when I'm the higher stack because you get more money that way.
Right.
Because that's how I kind of suggest it. Not to be, I want to be fair to myself too, you know.
Sure, of course.
I'm a better player, and I've definitely got more experience than most of those people. So
that's for sure.
I feel like I should get some sort of concession, you know. And sometimes I'll make a concession, you know.
Cool. I got two more questions of my own before we move into the community questions, if that's all right. So the first one I ask is, so many of your results have obviously come all across the great United States of America. Of course, you've been living in Las Vegas for quite a while, for decades. Where else in the US do you particularly enjoy playing poker, and why?
Well, prior to age 70, okay, I have a lot of results at the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. I also have a lot of results at Foxwoods, lots of trophies, you know. Matter of fact, the guy had told me that I had won one more trophy than he did at the Taj Mahal. So I have the record of trophies anyway, at the Taj Mahal. I'll say, what was your question again?
So it's where besides Las Vegas do you particularly enjoy playing?
So the East Coast, I really had a good time because I'm Italian and all my relatives are East Coast. So I get to go back and spend time with the relatives and the cousins. And it was just a lot of fun, you know. Most of my play was on the West Coast, usually the Commerce or the Bicycle Club. Lots and lots of caches over there, lots of trophies over there. So those are my favorite places. But one of the best times of my life, I had a backer, and he
Oh,
took me all over Europe.
huh.
So I got to play in London, Paris. And this was tournaments, not cash.
Right.
I played cash on my own. And then where else did we go? We went to Kiev one time.
Wow.
I know, I know. It was really Nice. We did some WSOP in France, and we did some WSOP in London. That lasted for about 2.5 years. And who
Huh.
wouldn't take this gig? Because I get to live in a villa at the French Riviera. I mean, who gets an opportunity like that, you know?
That's unbelievable.
And yeah, his name was Lance Funston. Wonderful, wonderful man, nice family. And you know, it was really, really. I got to see how the other half lived. You know, it was really pretty good.
And you got to see outside the poker rooms also, and like tour all those places.
Oh yeah, I did. I already toured those countries before when I was in the service, and
oh goodness,
and as a tourist, I've already done that.
huh.
But you know, to sit there and have cooks come in and cook for you, and I mean, wow, you know, waiters going to the table and picking up. You had dinner parties that were just utterly fantastic, followed by a poker tournament. And it would be like 8 people, 9 people, you know. Some, let's see, there were really no professionals. They were just like a bunch of Frenchmen.
Right. I
don't want to say anything about the French, but for some reason, when I played in France, they like to slow roll you there. I don't know. Biggest slow rollers. I shouldn't, you know, it's not fair to say all of them are like that. But
that's of course.
Quite a few.
Of course. I said only one more question on, but I'd be remiss if I didn't pick up on one thing you said. You said when I was in the service. Can you just tell us a little bit about your time serving, you know, in the armed forces? What did you do, and do you look back upon that time with any particular fondness?
Yeah, probably one of the best times of my life. We played poker, of course. We played payday stakes. So we played 25, 50 cents. My pay as a private was $150 a month, I think, or less. And at the end of the month, I'd be over there collecting, you know, $30 here, $40 there. Nice. So my pay was closer to $300 a month. So I was stationed in Italy. I got very fortunate. It was during Vietnam. I had an accident when I was training, and it kind of injured my back, and they took me out of infantry. Thank God I probably wouldn't be here talking to you if I went to Vietnam in the infantry. And they put me in a different MOS. It was called communications. So I worked in a communications center. And the CEO of the center really took a liking to me because I was a college graduate, and you know, not too many people in the service were college graduates.
Right.
So he had me do all this. I was like his secretary, you might say. I did all the reports, and he just loved it. And so one day he says, "John, they want to know if you want to go to Officers Candidate School in Fort Benning, Georgia." So then I would be a first lieutenant, and you know where I'm going after that. I'd go to Vietnam, you know. But at that particular time, and I was still kind of patriotic, I thought about, you know, I would like to be an officer. But at that particular time, every weekend, I got to go to Florence, Italy, and party with 2 exchange programs, all the women from Florida State University and the University of Florida. There were 98 women and me. That's pretty good odds. Now, there was 2 other guys. And the 2 other guys played poker. Sometimes we'd have a poker in this great big villa in Florence. And I was popular because I'd bring the Budweiser.
Right.
You know? And I drove a 63 Chevy. Who else had a 63 Chevy in Italy? Imagine driving through those small streets with a 63 Chevy.
I cannot. That does sound like some glorious good old days.
Yeah. So I had a wonderful time in the service, you know. Could have gone the other way, but I was fortunate, and it didn't.
Good. Well, it's always very cool to hear those sorts of stories. Thank you for sharing that. One more question from me before we move to the community questions. You know, you've obviously had a front row seat to a lot of poker's history. Do you have any particular hopes for the game? And how about, you know, beyond continuing to, you know, hold the record for most cashes, do you have, you know, any thoughts about what you'd like your own poker legacy to be?
I do. I jotted down a few things because I figured I'd get a question like that. And what I would like to see is mixed games rise to the level of no limit poker.
Preach.
Amen. End of story. But seriously, when I started out in the 70s, 80s, I was there, I'm sorry, the 80s, 90s, you know, limit hold'em was number one. Now nobody even wants, they want it when they have to play limit hold'em, right? That was the number one game. Number two game was no limit hold'em. So Texas Hold'em, top two spots. And I loved Omaha Ada better. And that was kind of down. But as just before the explosion, it was right up there with No Limit. We got, if No Limit had 240 players, we had 235. It was great, you know? And then Moneymaker comes along and screws the whole thing up. TV comes in and makes what? History with poker. We're on TV all of a sudden, you know? And what game did they use? Did they use Omaha? No, they used No Limit. And I have to admit, I'm not, you know, I don't have an axe to grind here. No Limit is so much better to watch on
for TV, sure.
It's exciting. Sometimes my heart pitter patters, even today. You know, if I'm in the middle of a bluff, I'm trying to be as stationary as possible and not giving off any tells. You know, it's like, oh man, this is tough. It's exciting to watch. Nobody really cares if, oh, he has ace deuce and he's splitting the pot with the two pair. And split the pot, we'll split the pot. Or stud. Remember when they had stud on TV? And I remember a hand between Ted Forrest and Chad Brown. It was kind of a dumb hand, but you know, it just didn't get, I can see why it didn't get the ratings because it's kind of boring to watch, really.
Right.
But now that people have seen the ways of mixed games being a challenge, much more fun, you know, I mean, I'm sick of No Limit Hold'em, to be honest with you, but I'm playing it more than I used to, let's put it that way. Mixed game is just so much more challenging, you know, so much, there are different variations. There's games I can't even spell, right? Who the hell thought of Drama?
Drama do 7, baby. Let's go.
And who the hell was Archie anyway?
I love it.
Archie does live in Arizona. I found that out.
Okay.
He was a live one in the game. But yeah, getting back to that, I would like to see a surge mixing. There already is one, but it's still not at the level of No Limit. And I understand the big prizes and the WPTs. That's going to be on TV probably forever, doing well. But they need to balance a little bit. We need to get more players coming from Hold'em over to the mixed games. And we do that sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
We have bracelet winners, which would be a tip for anybody going to the World Series. What should they do? Well, you shouldn't really play a game that you know nothing about unless you got a lot of money.
Right.
All right. It's like I said, oh yeah, the best hand is ace, deuce, 3-4 rainbow. Sit down and play. They just want to win a bracelet.
Right.
So if you can afford to do that, by all means, join us. But if you are, you know, on a budget or you have a certain bankroll, you know, stick to the games you know.
Yeah.
Stick to the, you know, the games that have good selection where you can choose. Well, there's two good players, two bad players, and there's a couple of loosey-gooseys. That's a good game to get into, you know. Sure. And you know, the old saying, when you sit down at the poker table and you look around for the live one and you don't see them, you know.
That means it's you. That's it. Exactly.
I've been there a few times. I've been in that seat.
And your own legacy, is that something you've given thought to besides holding the cash games record? Is there something you'd like for that to be? Specifically promoting mixed games or something else you'd like to be remembered for in poker?
I think I've already hit that goal. And a lot of people say that I'm one of the nicest guys in poker. I'm a good guy. Concur. That's all I care about. Beautiful. I don't care about that other stuff.
I love it. Beautiful. Folks, this is now the segment of the show we turn to you guys, our Cards Chat community, to see what questions you wanted to ask our guests. We have a dedicated thread on the Cards Chat forums for this, so as we announce who our future guests will be, please be sure to send in your questions. Folks, a lot of you requested Miami John to be on the show, so we have a deluge of questions. We'll try to get through as many as we can, and of course, respect your time, John. So the Starfish would like to know, what was the toughest WSOP final table you were a part of, and did you enjoy that experience?
You gotta give me a second to think.
No problem.
Toughest WSOP. So I think any WSOP final table
Yeah.
is going to be pretty tough.
Okay.
Nothing comes to mind. I've been there with Phil Hellmuth. I've been there with Phil Ivey. Not if I had game selection, they wouldn't be it. They wouldn't be invited. So some of the, I think the studs are the toughest tables because the stud players, they don't venture down into the other games. They strictly stick to stud. So they're all really, really good at their game.
Specialists, right?
Which, you know, which is, to me, you should venture out. You know, that's why horse was invented, to get people with, you know, commonality in certain games to get together. So they're not all that proficient at one game, but they're, you know, really good at the other games. And the stud table, one day comes to mind. I had Cindy Violet, David Williams, a lot of good stud players. It was my second stud event in a row, and I finished fifth both times in front of my father, who passed away that year.
Wow.
And he wanted me to win 3 bracelets that year. I've only won 3 in my life. And he was there both times, and I got 5th and 5th. And I remember playing with David Williams, and this is kind of, you know, the players you're up against when you get to the final table. I said, sure. David, don't you ever take a free card? You know, he's so aggressive. And he says, the only reason why I don't is because I'm afraid I'll be given one. So if you're up against guys, that kind of mentality, you know, you got a tough table. And you get a lot of cream that rises, especially in the Omaha tournaments. Cream really rises in the Omaha.
That's for sure.
Horses. Yeah,
sure. Neptunus888 has this question for you, John. How do you deal with tilt after taking a tough beat on the bubble?
Go have a drink.
That's fair.
The old John would have probably ranted and raved, been pissed off, and would have, you know, carried it for a week. The new John says, most of the time, nice hand, and walks away. Now, how I acquired that, we've already talked about how I've gotten to that point. So there's 2 different types of my career, 2 different people. The first John who came over wasn't that sophisticated in poker, was an emotional wreck as far as, you know, getting angry and stuff like that. And through the tutoring of friends and books and just self-help stuff, meditation, I was able to tone it down quite a bit. So I'm proud of myself the way I am now. Am I perfect? Nope.
No. Who is, right? Love Poker has a question for you like this. Have you ever played against Stu Unger? And if so, was his hand reading ability as legendary as the people say that it was?
It was spectacular. He was that freaking good. Okay. Now, we played some cash games. Now, I got in, we played, he came down to our level, 75, 150, 1 in 200, Omaha hit better. And he wasn't that good of an Omaha player, but he learned very, very quickly. And it was limit, you know. One time, he had made the nut flush on the river, and he check raised in a 4-handed hand. There were 4 people in the hand. And I said, Stewie, I would always bet because I'm afraid I'm not going to get anybody to bet for me. He got the bet. He got the check raise. He not only got 1, he got 2 callers. All right. That's how clever the guy was. And, you know, to his, to put a feather in his cap. He really was very, very good. He went, you know, downhill a little bit. One other time I played with Stewie, he was in a tournament, the very first time I ever played with him. And the flop was Queen Jack, and he had Queen 10. I had 10-9. I was in the big blind. And I wasn't, this was in the years just probably right after I got broke or just before I got broke. I don't quite remember. But I moved in on him with a draw. Okay. Just something I wouldn't do now. So I had up and down 10-9. And he didn't think about it. He just said 2 words to me: draw, call. So
wow.
He knew I was drawing. and he called me instantly.
Wow.
And, you know, and then I remember another guy was at the table. His name is Yosh. And Yosh said,
Yosh
that King
Nakano,
10, John?
sure.
I said, nope, 10-9. So, and then just to make matters worse, I paired my 10, no, my 9.
I have to
Something
say
like that.
also, this happened to me. Like, I get to hear from a lot of poker players who play for so many. It just always astounds me your card recall, your hand recall. It's like you have a eidetic memory. Like you can put yourself right back there at that table and see the cards in front of you.
And that's really important when you're learning poker because you have to be able to describe what happened. I have I have a few students and they go on and on and on and then they change the story. But I thought you said you had this. Oh, I had that. Oh, no, I didn't. Yes, I don't have that problem. I always remember pretty much everything. Now, what I don't remember, when people come up to me and say, John, remember that hand 8 years ago? I don't even know their face, much less the hand 8 years ago. And they want to rub it in, how I sucked out on their quads or whatever, whatever. But I don't remember that well. But yeah, particular hands and scenarios, I'm pretty good at it.
Okay. Matty Bumpo has sort of I guess, a strategy question. What is the most important concept to keep in mind for a player who's trying to switch from No Limit Hold'em to Omaha 8 or better?
Same thing that we discussed before. It's two different conditions. It's not Hold'em to Omaha. It's no limit to limit. All right. So to me, the basic difference is in no limit poker, you don't have to show down a hand. In limit poker, you almost always have to show down your hand. So the switching over is pretty much have the goods when you come into the pot. If you don't have the goods when you come out of the pot, you have to know your opponents and you have to be able to bluff. You have to sell some sort of a story.
Right.
If the story doesn't make any sense, don't try it in limit poker. You're only gonna, get called.
For sure.
No limit's different. You can get away with a lot more. So to me, that's the most important thing is not to think of Hold'em and Omaha, to think of no limit and limit. And that goes with any limit game, whether it's Raz, Studs, Stud 8 or better,
Sure.
8 or better.
Absolutely.
It's a different mindset.
And before we move on to the next question, just for folks who are listening, I do want to apologize. I can't ask every single question you submitted. And also, John has answered many of them in the other answers that he's given. So thanks for everyone who has submitted questions. Here's one from right field from Acid Burn FX. Not necessarily at the poker table, John, but what is the biggest lie that you have ever told and gotten away with it?
Why?
If you'd like to pass on that one, we'll give you one pass.
I'll only pass for one reason. Not that I want to, but I just can't think of anything right now. The biggest lie I ever told and got away with. Man, that would have to be a gargantuan lie.
Or can you remember a particular bluff you got away with that was really, really big?
Not necessarily. Okay. I bluff well. I get caught. I get away with it. I know one thing is that when I am bluffing, I just try to stay focused on the pot, and I don't try to give off any tells. But as far as straight out lying, I just can't come up with anything like that.
That's fair. No problem. Here's an interesting one. Kun Aguero Cruz, I hope I got that name correct, wants to know, has your degree in finance helped you as a poker player?
At all.
Not at all. Well, perhaps with bankroll management and something like that, or just really completely unrelated?
Bankroll management to me that's a life lesson and common sense, So having a degree in finance, which I've never used, by the way, and I'm a terrible businessman, by the way. So, thank God that, I have my poker skills, because if I had to make it on business, I don't think I would do very, very well.
Okay. Crystal. Okay. Crystals has this one for you. Obviously not rubbing anything in, but just matter-of-factly saying that you have not had a six-figure cash in many years. Is that a goal of yours to get back to making more six-figure cashes?
Yeah, I haven't played that many six-figure cashing type tournaments, with the exception of the WSOP and a few WPTs. And she's totally right. It's been a while. It nags on me. But I mean, there's been so many times that I've gotten right to the cusp of, 13th, 14th place. And just one hand goes wrong, and that's all it takes. And there goes your six-figure cash. This has been going on for quite some time. I'd say at least 12 years. And part of the reason too at the WSOP is the players, they're not unskilled. They come from different areas of the country. Some of them is dead money. You see more dead money, I think, in No Limit, but you don't see it that much dead money in limit poker. I mean, there is, but not that much.
Right.
So you're always up against a tougher field. But I don't have any excuses, like, oh, I just ran bad, or or they got lucky, that just the usual standard things that happen to you along the way.
Sure.
So that's probably the reason. I really don't have any excuses for it, but doesn't mean I'm not going to try, and I'll probably cash one this year.
Okay.
But I'm always trying.
I hope so for yours. That would be really cool.
I remember I was on the cusp of going to the top three in a big PLO 8 or better, and Devilfish sucked out on me. Well, actually, I sucked out on him. Well, he didn't raise the pot. We got it all in, set over set, but I had a flush draw, and I hit the flush on the turn.
Nice.
I don't know, back then you didn't show your cards right away. He says, well, I got a flush, and I showed him. He says, oh, you put all that money in with a flush draw? I said, no, I got a set of eights too. Right? And the board paired quad queens for him.
Oh.
Yeah. So things like that happen.
Right.
So I'm 12th. He went all the way to second or third place on those chips.
Right. There you go.
I remember another time I was against Max Pescatori in a big horse event. And I raised a stud 8 or better, and I have aces, and we got it all in on Fifth Street. He was trying to represent a low, but he had pocket jacks. And I said, well, I got aces. He's great. You got aces? How's that possible? I said, yeah, I do. I said, well, don't worry. He catches a jack.
Oh, gosh.
I said, don't worry, Max. I try to be positive. There's still 2 more aces in the deck, right? And I was totally right, and he got both of them.
Goodness.
Just to rub it in.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's do 2 more to end off. Is that all right? We'll do 2 more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. Chica Bonita says, your son also plays poker. Have you ever participated in any tournaments together or played against each other?
We do every year. We play the 7-card stud, WSOP. That's the only event he plays now. So he's not really a poker player. But I taught him stud. He likes the game, and that's the only thing he knows, the only thing he plays. And as a father, I felt I don't really want to make my kid come out to Vegas and become a professional gambler. Let him do other things, let him find his own spot. So I just never pushed it, and he never went any further than stud. Okay. And he got to play, he got good experience. He's played against Ivy. He's played against a lot of good stud players, and he just doesn't have a lot of exposure, doesn't play that often. Once a year is just not enough. Once in a while, we'll go to the Commerce and we'll play the LA Classic, and they'll have a championship event for stud, or they used to anyway. And I remember he got crippled by James Woods in a hand, and James had the worst hand, of course. And my son just laughed, and he said, made some reference to him as the family guy, and I guess there's something where he picks up candy. I don't know. He said, oh, just a piece of candy. He's putting his chips in. Oh, a piece of candy. Kind of giving it to my son, but in a friendly way, of course.
Right, of course. Our last question comes to us from Nasty Bent Gorilla. That is the person's name. That's a very creative name. And you could obviously take a moment to think about this one if you'd like. A nice question to end off on. Obviously, you've played poker, most of your life. What would you say is one of, if not the most important lessons that you've learned from all your years playing, as far as how that's impacted the rest of your life? And you can take a moment to think about that.
You're talking about a life lesson or poker?
A life lesson that you've learned from all of your years playing poker.
I think we've already hit on it, and that's my emotions. to keep control of your emotions. And I noticed the new influx of players don't seem to have that kind of a problem. They seem to be pretty well grounded. They know where they're going, they know what they're doing, that type of thing. But when I learned poker, there are not a lot of good role models. I mean, I could tell you stories that you'd say, what? They did that, yeah. So, I had some tough times. I really did. I just would get very angry. I take it out on a dealer, being mean, that type of thing, which was totally wrong. I knew it was totally wrong, but nevertheless, I saw other people do it. So I kind of learned that, and it just took me to a level where I was just not very happy with myself. So, especially after I came back from my bust out in Daytona Beach and go into the Las Vegas Hilton to deal, certainly had a better outlook, not because I was dealing, because I already had dealt before at the Stardust, but just a more professional outlook, and needed to manage my emotions much better. And that I was always a work in progress. But like I said, with the coming of Moneymaker and the new breed of poker players and television and my meditation and everything like that, I was able to get past. So that was very impactful in my life, because without that, I might be the same person I was 20 years ago.
Beautiful. And so I'm going to be doing my wrap up. So don't hang up the phone or anything like that, John. I just want to just finish up the show. I want to thank everyone for sending in questions for John Cernuto. And again, remind you all out there in the Cards Chat community, we'd love for you to submit your questions for our future podcast guests in the dedicated thread on the forums. Guys, please be sure to give us a good review on iTunes and spread the word via your social media channels if you'd like the show. John, thank you again very much. Thank you all for tuning in once again to another episode of the Cards Chat Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at CardPlayerLife. I'm Robbie Straczynski. That's Miami John Cernuto. I wish you all a wonderful day. Cards Chat, the friendliest poker podcast in town from the world's #1 poker community.